podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for another news update on this lovely Friday as we prepare for this Saturday's game at Stadium Light on International Fans Day against Swansea City. If you haven't already, check out the preview that we did with Luke from Swanscast. Make sure you grab that after this show. But of course, there's loads on the feeds this week. So we've got lots to bring you up to date on. Today is a news pod though, because Regis Le Bris held a press conference on Friday afternoon chatting about the game at the weekend and various other things, injuries and bits and bobs in the run-in for the end of the season. And there was the release of the minutes from the Supporters Collective meeting this week, so we're going to chat a little bit about that. Anyways, because majority of Roker Report's wider family have travelled up to the northeast this weekend, you're just left with me and Chris this afternoon. So, it's us two, innit, mate? Hello.
Right. All right, just rub it in, just because I'm missing it. I knew you would get a little dig in because I'm missing it. I was thinking actually for this we need a How We're the Podcast news kind of breaking news jingle or something like I don't know what it will be, but we'll have to have a think about it.
Or like a police chase on the bridge or something. Like. Breaking news. It wasn't as glamorous as that Regis Le Bris' press conference. There rarely are, but there are a few bits and bobs out of that I want to talk about. The big one off the top was the update on Romaine Mundle. He was asked specifically about what the update was on his fitness and where he's at, and it sounds like they're targeting getting him back for the playoffs, which is good. I mean, that could be ambiguous, like which leg of the playoffs, or would it just be the final, or is this a case of pushing him as far as we can to try and get him fit? Like, ordinarily, would you try and push a player this much to get them ready for a series of games if it was just in the middle of the season? But regardless, it was a positive one. He didn't say that his season was over, so that's something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but I don't know. Glass half full, glass half empty. I don't know which way you want to look at it, because last time he was out, it was 4 to 6 weeks for about 12 weeks or something, wasn't it? Even when he'd had about 8 weeks out, it was still 4 to 6 weeks. That never changed. So, I mean, you're hoping that it's, that he's speaking where that he knows that he's going to be available, because he's just so important to us, isn't he? I mean, when you look at the team, you talk about pace. I mean, earlier in the season, he was so important, or when our style of play, catching teams on the break. I mean, him and Mayenda, especially those two, the amount they're court sides with their pace. So it's great. It'll be great to have him back, and we do need him. He just gives us a completely different dimension with that pace. But yeah, it is. I don't want it to be one of those scenarios though. And look, I kind of go back to, got all the way back to 1990 when there was the biggest dilemma that Dennis Smith had was Colin Pascoe. And it was like, who do we play on the left during the playoffs? And it was like Warren Hawke actually came in for the away leg at Newcastle, and then he changed it up again for the Wembley game. And it was this thing where it was like, will Colin Pascoe make it? Will he not? And it was things like that. So I don't want it to be one of those things that almost takes over the whole conversation about us being in the playoffs, because it's not all about Mundle. But if he's kind of touch and go, the conversation will be all about him, because he brings so much. And I think it all depends on how much game time Le Fée gets as well between now and the end of the season, and how much he kind of looks fit and looks sharp. Because I think if Le Fée comes in and starts playing games and bagging the goals and assists and doing what he can do, we'll kind of maybe forget a little bit that Mundle's out. But if Le Fé's not looking sharp, then the conversation's going to go back to Mundle, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he's going to leave us guessing on that, to be honest, because he was asked specifically, wasn't he, about Enzo Le Fée, and it sounded to me, he didn't say it, but it sounds like they're going to be very, very, very careful with him, which they should. We've said this repeatedly on the pod. They should be careful with him. He was asked about taking our time with Le Fée, and he said yes for him and for others. But I mean, he's going to get half an hour here and there, maybe an hour. He's not going to be chucking them on for full games. He actually talked, didn't he, about when he first came in, the fact that I think he said we were on the edge. He was talking about basically we were still in the automatics race. and it was a case of we just have to play him. We didn't have Watson, we didn't have Mundle. We had to play him. Where we're in a bit more of a luxury situation now, and it's a case of like just wrap him in cotton wool. We're going to see a lot more Tommy Watson than I think we possibly thought we were going to see, but we're using that situation to our advantage. He's here. It gives us the chance to rest players. Let's do it.
Yeah, and this gives me the opportunity to go back to a conversation that me, you and Martin had when Le Fay first signed. I think it might have been Borough away. I can't remember the first, I don't think it was Borough away actually, but before his first game that he came in, and we were debating whether he would be chucked straight in. And my argument at the time was he'd only played like 4 games and then he picked up an injury and then he fell out of favour and we managed to get him. But he hadn't played for, I think, going back to, what was it, August, September of last year. I think that was the last time he played first team football before he came to us. And I said at the time when he joined, I said, you know, in an ideal world, I'd get him straight in and 90 minutes and, you know, because we needed him at the time. Like you said, we were desperate. And like I said, you know, the manager described it as being on the edge, and we were. But having said that, he played so little that this was likely that he was going to pick up an injury. So I was trying to argue at the time, brilliant, yeah, but bring him in slowly. But we were still chasing for the top 2. So it was like, yeah, we need to chuck him in. And because he's played so little football, he's picked up a couple of injuries this season. Like everyone now knows he's got to be wrapped up in cotton wool. And you wonder what that does in his head. Because, you know, you hear some players talk about, you know, where they think, you know, they struggle to think that they're fit again because they haven't played much football and they're not feeling too sharp. So, look, we just need to look after him. And just even if it's for those half an hour bursts, like you said, I mean, even in the playoffs, sometimes you just need that bit of magic. If he can come on for, you know, the last 15 minutes in a game to give us a 2-1 lead or to pull it back in one of the legs or something like that. We just need him on the pitch for enough time that he can do some damage. So yeah, I'm going to be skeptical whether he's going to be in the starting 11 for the playoffs. Because like I say, I think we're going to have to really kind of nurse him through it, and just, it's almost like saying, right, well, what times is he going to be most effective and things like that, because he's not going to play 90 minutes for the rest of the season in every game.
I thought tying into that, I thought his response on Jobe was quite interesting, because he was asked, is Jobe back for tomorrow? And he went, no, we're going to keep him fresh and competitive for the final run, is the words he used.
Well, so, yeah, he had a bit of a laugh, didn't he? And he said he's going to skip this one. So it's not like he's out. It's like, oh, we're just going to skip him for this one.
Yeah, and I think that's possibly the attitude with a few players. It's just there's no reason for these players to play tomorrow. Look, people will be sick of me saying this. I've said it on every podcast for about 3 weeks, but it is like pre-season. It's like pre-season. It is. We are basically now in a 3-game season, and he was asked quite a bit about balance and momentum and things like that. And the trick is that whilst he probably wants to rest every single one of them and just take them all out and say, keep yourself for the final 3 games, he can't, because the risk is you start losing, the negativity sets in, people don't look forward to the playoffs. So that's a tough balance to strike, isn't it? Making changes to keep the team fresh, but it not negatively impacting on results. To now, we've kept 3 clean sheets, and whilst the Norwich game was poor, I mean, the last 20 minutes when we brought better players on, we improved. But he got the balance right, in my opinion, because we went away to a team who've scored loads of goals this season, have barely lost at Carrow Road this season. We kept a clean sheet and came away with a point. He would have been over the moon with that. And that was the whole point of the game, was to get through it, try not to get any more injuries, rest some key players, move on to the next one. And to be honest, I think that's probably going to be the approach again tomorrow. I wouldn't be shocked if you see, Alexic again, Watson again, Helder starting again. These players who've been on the fringes a little bit. I mean, another one who got mentioned, and you caught it right at the end, and I didn't, and I'm glad you did, was that he was asked about Salis being back in the squad. He's been training all week. He's only on loan. Play him. If we can get an hour out of Salis, give Dan Neil a rest and play him. But, people are going to look at that and think, well, why? But I genuinely think the most important thing, we need Dan Neil for 3 games at the end of the season. We don't need Salis. So I'd rather flog him than Dan Neil at this stage.
Yeah.
It's again, it's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the amount of times he said balance during the press conference, I wish I'd kept a tally how many times he said that word. But it was a couple of things were really interesting. I think Nick Barnes asked him a good question about the Coventry game being almost like a watershed moment, turning, when the season kind of turned in terms of, focusing again on those playoffs and realising what we've got to do. And it was interesting, his response, the manager's response, when he said that actually going into that Coventry game, he actually used the word exhausted. He said that the squad. He said the squad are exhausted, and I think that tells you a lot for a manager to come out with that. Because I remember, you listen to Alex Ferguson when he says it, and he says the last thing you almost tell people publicly is actually what's going on. If your squad's knackered, you say the opposite. You keep saying the opposite until people believe it, and your players believe it as well. But he came out and he said his squad was exhausted, and he actually said we're a small group as well. So he hinted at that he's essentially using the same players. And he also, the other interesting thing, he talked about the Coventry game, but he talked about the Coventry game and put them in the same bracket as the West Brom and Norwich game. So it looks like, he said, right, well, we were exhausted with Coventry, but after the break, we've looked at the West Brom and Norwich games, and he said, we've looked at them in terms of almost preparing for that away leg in the playoffs. And he said that I think they're almost practicing, and I think that tells you a lot about the performance at Norwich, where it was almost like, let's practice our defensive shape. Because in the away leg, you come away, let's say, we get a team like West Brom or Bristol City or whoever it is, and, Norwich City, I think are probably out of it. But like you said, the top scorers in the division, it's almost like a chance to say, right, let's practice our defensive shape. Let's practice how we keep a clean sheet away from home. And that takes us into that away leg saying, right, lads, you know what to do.
And West Brom before it, a team who hadn't lost to anybody in the top four, had only lost twice all season at home. We went there and we did a job on them. We didn't go and try and play football. And we said this after the game. We were talking about it and we were saying that was almost like a dress rehearsal of a playoff game. Yeah. I think this is the way that this is all preparation, but the way that high level, deep thinking coaches think about these situations compared to your ordinary fan who just sees the performance and goes, well, that was shite and should never play Alexic again. You've got to think about this rationally. It's a brilliant, I keep saying this is a brilliant position to be in. Unique. You look at whoever drops out the top two is going to be disappointed and it's going to go right the way of that. So whoever finishes third is going to have to really graft to try and get into the top two. And then fifth and sixth place, I mean, that's a 4 or 5 team battle at the minute. So that could go right down to the last day. And we'll be the outlier in all of that. We'll be the one in there who've basically just had a chance to breathe, and nobody else will have. Yeah. And we've got to use that to our advantage. And that means resting players, rotating, practicing how we're going to play, like you said, in the second leg of the playoffs or in the home leg of the playoffs tomorrow. That might be an indicator. Playing against a team, Swansea like to play quite open, so it's probably a good dress rehearsal for playing a good side who might come and try and play a bit against you. So look, these are all opportunities, and he's definitely using that. I mean, it was interesting that they kept talking about Coventry because I don't know, like I thought he bit back a bit at Nick a couple of times because there was almost a suggestion that he was like, well, do you feel like you're getting back to your best? And he went, we're already in a good place. So he was talking up the team more than trying to focus on the negative connotation of maybe what he felt the question was. He was talking the team up, saying we've been consistent was his favourite word today. He was just talking all about consistency. And it's interesting, I think we're going to see we're going to probably see something tomorrow that makes us think, with the team selection and the way we play and things, it probably will be another practice session for what's to come.
Yeah, well, one of those bites, he actually said, as you said, we're actually in a good place, but he also said we deserve it. And I think it's almost a little bit of a bite to say, like, that people are going on about, the 0-0 draw, or that people go back to that defeat at Coventry. And I think it's almost a little bit bite back to say, we're fourth in the league. And he actually mentioned how many points we've got specifically. He said, look, we've got 76 points. We've done really well. And he almost kind of laughed at it and said, we deserve to be where we are. But in the same mould, he also went on to talk about that, there was a big focus on the last 5 games. And he said, look, because of what we've done, we've got those foundations in place. So he said it's about building on the same foundations. He actually said that, building on the same foundations as we've put together this season. And then it's all about momentum and consistency, because he then talked further on. I think there was one towards the end where he was talking about that he's built on those tactics, that the players kind of know what they need to do in terms of that shape and style. But when it comes to what we're doing now, he actually said the spirit in the squad is actually more important than tactics, because you can mess around with the tactics all you like, but if you've got players who don't win the 50-50s or don't win the headers, and then he pointed at the Coventry game where he said actually that was a really good reminder that if we haven't got our defensive shape, if we're not on it, if we don't win those 50-50s, if we haven't got that spirit, it's a good reminder how we can get punished. And I think he used the word punished as well in that to say that can happen. And he said, he was kind of saying that this is a really easy thing to happen if you just drop your levels a little bit, which shows actually how consistent we've been to get as many points. So yeah, it was all interesting how it was going on. And again, he was talking about, I mentioned he used the word balance a lot, because there was a lot of focus on that attack versus defense. Because I think somebody pointed out, how many goals were scored in the last 5 games or something like that. And he said it's about getting that right. And I think you're right in saying these games that we're doing now, it's almost like, Norwich game, top scorers. Look, let's work on our defensive shape. It's almost like top level training sessions in these games where you're saying, let's work on our defensive shape. And if we're in this situation, now you talked about the Swansea game coming up. Now, look, here's a game where we want to win by a couple of clear goals. Let's work on how we do that and how we do things in the final third. Yeah,
all in all, I thought he seemed pretty confident, relaxed, motivated to do well. The good thing about Regis Le Bris is he doesn't flap at all. He's like that when we lose. He's like that when we draw. He's like that when we win. He's just a very calm person, and that'll be useful when we go into the playoffs. Because I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, but Alex Neil was like that. Alex Neil was just didn't have any sort of, people would ask him things about atmosphere and the pressure of Sunderland getting promoted, and we failed for 3 years before, and he was just, it's just a game of football, and that does permeate, I think, through to the players. It must do when they're around people like that who are just chilled out.
Yeah, but Le Bris does it in a very different way at Alex Neil, because Alex Neil was like, if you mentioned, I remember the question, I think you talked about the question at Hillsborough in those playoffs where he just went, well, what about it? He said it's a game, they're on the field, doesn't really matter. So he was dismissing these things, whereas Le Bris would go, oh yeah, it's a great atmosphere, but it's, we prepare for the game, and he would give he would give a comment, but dismiss it in a completely different way. But I can see why he's, because we're talking to a few journalists, and you can see why he's probably a little bit frustrated in terms of them wanting to put loads of pen to paper. He's not going to give them a big headline in the afternoon papers or on the radio or whatever, but he just comes out and, I remember saying this after his very first press conference when we sat down and talked about it, and he just makes sense. Everything he says, you just go, you end up just nodding your head and go, yeah. I mean, there's nothing that he says you can ever really disagree with, because he doesn't, he's almost kind of trained himself into just answering the question, sometimes without answering the question, a proper politician. But he doesn't say anything out of place. He's not going to say anything huge that rocks the boat. And you just end up nodding along.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on from the press conference and on to what I said we would talk about before, the minutes from the supporters collective meeting, which were released, I think it was Wednesday. That meeting took place on the 26th of March, but obviously there's discussions got to go on. They've all got to agree on the minutes and stuff for those to go out. So it always takes a few weeks. But David Bruce, Paul Kingsmore, Oscar Chamberlain, Steve Wood and Chris Waters from the club were in attendance. I've just picked out a few things that we can chat about, because there's a bit in there which I think is very interesting. The stuff about the accounts was, obviously they explained away the accounts which were released recently. The losses were offset by the sale of players. They'll probably look even better next year, given that we sold Jack Clark, and the Hummel deal has been record-breaking for the club. The amount of merchandise we've sold this year has blown everything else we've done out the water. And the bit about the the loan which effectively the Louis Dreyfus family have paid to the club. David Bruce confirmed the line of credit included in the accounts was open to ensure cash flow was maintained, and it wasn't unusual in football finance. The owner has removed this external line of credit now by providing his own. It is important that Sunderland is financially stable. The club has a lot of working space regarding PSR, the AFL's financial control regulations. So, I mean, accounts, I'm not an expert. That's why we got one on to talk about it. But, you know, I think the line at the end there where it says, IH noted a recent charge notice on Company's House. David Bruce confirmed this is a line of credit extended to the club by the Louis Dreyfus family and demonstrated KLD's continued commitment to the club. The owners have invested 20 million into the club, which will be converted into equity. So a further 20 million pounds by the Louis Dreyfus family has been put back into the club. Why, we don't have to know really. But I think the bit that we do know, and the bit that David Bruce highlighted, was that it's a sign of Kirill's continued commitment to Sunderland, and that he plans to be here for a very long time, and he plans to keep investing, which can only be a good thing, I suppose.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, again, I'm not an expert either, but we had Kieran Maguire on to talk about the Sunderland accounts. And just a quick plug for that. If you haven't listened to that, you can go back and listen to what I got.
Still very relevant. So, yeah, go back and listen to that one.
It is. But yeah, and look, I mean, you know, talking about, if you would just want to look at it coldly and say, look, the family went into it as an investment. I mean, if you just want to look at it purely like that, you know, their interests is that Sunderland is successful, even if it's just purely because they wanted to make money out of the venture, which obviously that's got to be part of it. Look, I don't think he's done it out of the goodness of his health. I think he thought, take a team from League One and run it properly, and if you end up getting in the Premier League, you're going to make some money. So, you know, you go back to Bob Murray and you look at, you know, we talked about when he took over the club, look at what he left and look at how much he got along the way from running Sunderland Football Club. Yes, look, he did it because of the love of the club, but look, he made a hell of a lot of money out of it as well during his time as chairman. And look, people can be a bit wary of their love of the club and all this sort of stuff. And you know, that quite rightly question that because they've got no links to Sunderland other than owning them for this period of time. So look, if you just purely boil it down to money, if we get promoted, they could be, you know, they could stand to make a lot of money out of the club, and that's just reality. That's the way kind of football works. But he's done it in a good way. Look, I like the kind of line that the accounts section started with, where they said, obviously all revenue streams are up, and the club has the highest revenue of all clubs not in receipt of parachute payments. And considering where we were for 4 years, because sometimes 4 years in League One, I mean, if you don't bounce all the way up like a couple of clubs did, like Sheffield United and Wolves and Ipswich, I suppose, like that can kind of really kind of kick your club and knock it right down, and you're kind of struggling to get the revenue streams back up. But to do it that quickly, and to do it with the investment we made in some of the players and then selling them on. I mean, look at how much we bought Ross Stewart for, Jack Clark. Look how much we sold them on for, and that's how clubs from where we've come from had to be run. So, and the bottom line is, you know, we asked kind of Kieran Maguire how that sits in the Championship, those kind of, what was it, 9.7 million. And he went, yeah, loads of clubs lose more than that. Sunderland are in a pretty good shape, and the way they're doing things is a good way. And the other thing as well that they did say about trying to kind of reduce the club's losses, which they're bound to be, because it's not sustainable losing that much a year, and they want to be a sustainable club. I think that's the bottom line of where we want to be. And the other thing I quite liked is David Bruce getting a plug in there saying the Hummel deal's going to make a difference at some point. I had a chuckle at that.
The one he engineered.
Yeah, exactly. Fair play.
Yeah, well, I just think at a time when you're looking at even just around the Championship, Dafon Chansiri at Sheffield Wednesday.
Oh yeah,
can't pay the players, or you know, it's they're clearly running out of money, or he is running out of money, and they put season ticket renewals on sale in December, which is an indication of cash flow issues. They're now in a bit of a pickle. There was the threat there of them going under an embargo for 3 windows, and Sheff Wed are a huge club, and it just makes me glad we've got good people in charge who, yes, I think you bang on. Nobody gets into football just for the love of it unless you love that football club. There's always something else. And I think down the line, if Sunderland are stable in the Premier League, then there's opportunity there for other investment to come in, other owners, people who have designs on take us to the next level that maybe Louis Dreyfus can't take us to. And I'm sure those conversations will happen in future if we get there. But at the minute, we've got good people in charge who are doing the right thing for the club. And he might be quiet now. He might be lurking in the shadows and leaving the likes of David Bruce and Paul Kingsmore to run the club. But that's the way it should be. Do you know what I mean? We should have proper people in places of power who know how to run a business.
There's a couple of different aspects to that. I mean, look, I think the important thing, as you've said, we've got someone who's sensible in charge, because you see some of the crazy people owning football clubs and the mad things they do. I was reading something about the Italian, is it the guy who ran Leeds at one point? I was reading something about him the other week.
Him.
Just sounded absolutely mad. But we've got someone sensible in place, which means you talked about investment. If they're looking at the club, they're saying, actually, I wouldn't mind plugging X amount into that club because actually they ran well, and the owner's not going to do a midnight flit and kind of run with bags fulls of money and things like that. So, look, I think it does attract kind of sensible people when you've got one in charge. It was interesting listening to Jeff Brown though, and another plug for another pod, which there's no shame in that.
It was about
but it was interesting to him talking about that. I think he does frustrate the press. And actually, when things are going well, Sunderland fans don't realise that he doesn't say much, and he's not out in public saying things. But you do wonder if things start going south, that this kind of, this policy of not saying anything is going to wash. And I hope, obviously, we keep going in the right direction for a long time. But then you do wonder if kind of people are going to start shouting for him to say more if it doesn't work out.
I suppose if you reflect on the Ellis Short era, he was largely vacant, wasn't he? We didn't see hear much of him. But the difference, I think, is Short had people in charge around the club who didn't really know what they were doing, and it was clear for years that it was the case. Whereas I think David Bruce, being a Sunderland fan with his background, I think we've got somebody who is ridiculously overqualified to be at Sunderland. But because he's a Sunderland fan, we've got him, and we should be, grateful for that. And he's bringing a lot to the club. We're seeing it all over the place. Decisions being taken with fans in mind, which is a big thing that didn't happen for many years. I only these days I only worry about whether we're going to get promoted or not, and that's a good thing. It's more than about the off-field stuff, which when I first got involved with fanzine writing and things like that, we were a mess. We were an absolute mess. So, I'm just glad reading this. We've employed new, even come down to the ticketing section in the minutes. They're talking about moving to a better ticketing partner because the previous COO appointed Ticketmaster and they've been shit.
Yeah.
So that's been recognised. They're going with SeatGeek, who by all accounts are the top guys at the minute in football, certainly in England. The Man City use them, Liverpool use them. They're obviously the two best teams in the country at the minute. So that can only be a good thing. They've appointed a new ticket office manager who comes with big experience of working at big clubs. Again, that's important because ticketing is one area where we are really let down and have been for a while. So we should see improvements after the summer, hopefully, once Ticketmaster are out the way. There was the issue raised about the threshold, the attendance threshold for young fans. And I speculated at the time about this, that this was about more than young fans. This was about other people who abused tickets when it comes to young supporters. And it was raised in the minutes as that being the case. It says about young fans, they're at no risk of losing their season tickets. The intention is to address the issue of abuse around this category, including adults buying and entering the stadium on a concession ticket, or fans who simply block seats by buying a season ticket to guarantee a Wembley ticket, or to reserve a seat for extra legroom. I did say this the other week. I thought this was for more nefarious reasons. I mean, not to name anybody, but I know people who go to the match on kids' tickets, and I don't agree with it, but it's their choice, isn't it? It's an easy loop. I pay 400 odd quid. They probably pay about 50.
Yeah.
And they still got the same amount of games. And I'm sure people listening will know people who do that. And, whilst I might turn a blind eye to it, I don't agree with it. And if I know people, then it must be happening all over the stadium. And ultimately, the club are losing out on revenue because of it. People are getting into the game with a cheap ticket. Yeah. So they've got to try and do something about it. They're very aware of it. And the stewarding, because they use an outside agency for stewards and things like that, they're not always the best. They can just be anybody. And I know they said about extra checks going on around the ground for people with trying to find if people adults are getting in with kids' tickets and stuff. If that's happening, I'm not seeing it, because when I get in the ground, I never see a steward until I get up the stairs and get in my seat, and I can see them standing around at the bottom. So, yeah, at least it's been addressed. It was what I thought it was. I think they could have communicated it better, and they've acknowledged that. And that was the big thing, really, I think, was it wasn't communicated very well. They just made it sound like loads of people were going to get penalised for stuff that maybe is outside their control.
Yeah. I think everyone knows someone who's done this at some point. I remember when the stadium first opened and people were getting sent a second season ticket for Nout and things like that, and people were just keeping them and either selling them or going themselves or giving it away or something like that. But look, this has gone on for donkey's years. I remember, doing it for away games when people had done it, going back 25 years or something, when I needed to get a kid's ticket, but fellas were getting kids' tickets for away games and things like that. So it's gone on for donkey's years. There's probably ways and means to do it, but I don't think they've quite really kind of got the right way of doing it. And this one kind of didn't go out very well. It wasn't communicated very well. People were asking questions. People didn't know how it worked. They were worried that it impacted, and this is the big worry, that it's going to impact real kids who have got tickets. Now, if it impacts them, that's your lifeblood of the club, because if they're going along now, you want them to be going along in 10 years as well, and then you want them to make sure their kids go. So that's how the kids the club continues to sell tickets. So they've got to do it in the right way that doesn't impact kids. But look, from the club's point of view, looking at it, you can see why they wanted to do something about it, but I'm not quite sure they've picked the best way.
No. They moved on to stadium experience, and it was
just one thing quickly system. Before we leave the tickets. I was absolutely gutted that the usual ringing around the ticket offices hadn't been done, because that's one thing I look forward to in a minute.
Well, I'm looking at the attendance list, and I don't think Malcolm Bramley was in attendance.
Okay.
And it's always Malcolm Bramley who does that.
That's the bit I look forward to in these meeting minutes.
Yeah. When he caught them out on that, he's done it 2 or 3 times, didn't he?
Yep.
And he was like,
brilliant.
Well, I tried ringing everybody and I couldn't get through to Sunderland, but I got through to everyone else.
Brilliant.
But maybe he got someone else to do it for him, and knowing he wasn't going to be at the meeting. So they moved on to the stadium experience and engagement, and this was another big talking point to come out of the meeting, because as well as acknowledging they've done quite a lot to improve the supporter experience in terms of the new Bose PA system they've got in, the lighting, which I quite like, actually. It looks good on a night time, and when I'm walking the stadium I can hear the foghorn going off and all that. I like all that stuff. The safe standing, which I got to try for the cup game against Stoke, was it? We played Stoke in the cup? Can't even remember.
Cup beat.
I used the safe stand for that. Really good. First time I've used it, and if they encourage that further around the stadium into where I sit in the southwest corner, I would be well up for that, because stand for the full game anyways. But David Bruce talked about the fact that the club would like to be open, or would like to open discussions on the position of away fans and the creation of an atmosphere group. So we'll address them separately. The position of away fans has been something which Sunderland fans have discussed ever since they moved them, because I don't think anybody particularly likes it. The fact that away fans are right out the way, it's clearly impacted on atmosphere. I've been in the southwest corner since 2001, and it was when I was a kid in particular, I loved it, because when a game was shit, you could just give a bit stick to the away fans, and it was like, there's a bit of banter going back and forth, and if one of them got chucked out, it would just, all these sort of things that you don't get anymore because they're right out the way. And I do think something has been lost. On the other side of that, though, when you play a club who barely bring anybody, it looks shite when the full end behind the goal is empty. So that I watched some of the season review stuff back now, or when Craig posts the videos of old goals and games on our Twitter page and Blue Sky and all that, and Instagram. When he does that, and I watch them back, and I'm like, fucking hell, was the stadium really that empty? It looked crap. So that's got to be considered. But the fact the club are open to doing it is interesting, because I think it's been raised enough to the point where they have to acknowledge it almost. And I was talking to you off air just before there, and I might be wrong on this, someone can correct us if I am, but I'm fairly certain that in the Premier League you do have to give a certain amount of tickets to an away team that are in the lower bowl.
Yeah.
So there is that. If we get promoted, it might be something we're forced to do anyways. But the fact that they're open to talking about this it's a step in the right direction, in my opinion. I think it's something, considering we don't sell out, that top tier in particular is empty most of the time. You know, bar the bit in the Premier Concourse, there's about 8,000 seats, usually unused, up there. So if we can get the away fans down into the main bowl to improve the atmosphere at games, I'm all for it. But I don't know what you think. I mean, it's where they put them, isn't it? Is the big thing, and this was raised by someone on the meeting. I think it was Michelle Barraclough in the minutes, that if you put them in the lower bowl, you're going to be moving people who've had season tickets there for years and years, and that's got to be a consideration. So it would then be, wouldn't it? It would be weighed up between what's more important, moving the away fans or pissing off a couple of thousand of your home supporters.
Yeah, it's a real tough one for them. And just on that, the Premier League allocation, I did notice in the notes that it said in the Premier League the away ticket allocation would be 3,000, but I'm not sure whether there's any kind of terms in looking at where they need to be.
My reading of that was because somebody had brought up that Preston brought 330, Cardiff had brought 490. I thought that was more a retort of, if you get to the Premier League, teams won't be bringing 300 fans. Yeah.
Well, this is why I was saying at the beginning that it's going to be tough, because the thing is, when you're thinking, and me and you were lucky enough to actually been at the Stadium of Light when the away fans were in the lower bowl. We've actually experienced that. I mean, I remember first couple of seasons, although we weren't all that successful most of the time against them, but I remember the Mags fans being in the lower bowl in the South Stand, in the first few seasons, and the atmosphere was
good.
No, I was thinking.
Do you know the one I always think of? When they beat us 4-1.
I was going to say Shearer.
They were singing We'll Meet Again, and it was just like, I was sat right next to them. Yeah. That's one of my worst memories as a fan. So there is that, like.
But there was that. But the thing is, that's what you think about. And when you think about them being in the lower bowl, and you're talking about improving atmosphere, but then you're thinking about the games against the Mags, or you're thinking about the games against Liverpool, or you're thinking, the Man United, because Man United travel well, to be fair to them, or they used to at least. But, then you compare that against what's being stated in the minutes, where you're looking at 330 fans from Preston or 490 fans from Cardiff, and actually for them to be in the lower bowl, it means there's a massive section of seats just completely empty, and then you lose a bit of the atmosphere anyway, even if there is a couple hundred, because actually, you see some of them games where there's a couple hundred away fans and the atmosphere is crap because there's no banter really backwards and forwards. There might be between one or two nutters who want to meet in the car park afterwards, but other than that, it gets pretty crap. So it's this balancing act. I mean, how do you do that? You don't want to say, oh well, for the small clubs we stick them up at the top because it doesn't matter, and the big clubs we stick in the lower bowl because it's better atmosphere. The other thing is, like, what makes us a little bit sad, especially when you're talking about this, what is it, atmosphere group? I mean, I just feel a bit sad that people are talking about needing an atmosphere group. It just makes me feel a little bit down. I mean, because should you need one? I mean, because should you need the away fans to feed off it? And there was a really good comment, and I'm going to have to look at the notes. Jim Gilling, I think it was, made the point in the notes in the actual meeting to say that actually, do you actually need the away fans? Because good atmosphere feeds off what the players are doing on the pitch. Now, if the players, and we're not talking about, exciting football or anything like this, but when you see a tackle going in, that's sometimes one of the biggest cheers of the game, other than a goal going in. And it's that show of commitment, and the players playing a good brand of football and whatever, that actually you don't need the away fans because the home fans are up for it. And to say that you need that atmosphere, I mean, there has been a drop off in how good the atmosphere is at the stadium. I don't think anyone can deny that. But I mean, I go back to Roker Park, and there was as much as I look at that with rose-tinted specs on, there were some games where I was at Roker Park in the freezing cold and it was 15,000, if not less, and the atmosphere wasn't great. It wasn't great at the Roker Park every single week, but it did make a din when people were up for it, and that was the point. I think when the crowd's lifted by what's happened on the pitch, it just makes it different. So I think it would be a sad thing. I mean, how do you generate atmosphere? For me, I don't think atmosphere is something that's generated by kind of one person or a group of people. It's almost a spontaneous thing by lots of people. And the spontaneous reaction is reacting to something that's happening in front of them. So if it's a crap game, you can't suddenly just generate atmosphere out of thin air. That's just not going to happen. They have to have something to feed off, and it's a two-way thing between the fans in the stand and what's happening on the pitch. So I'm a bit skeptical of fan atmosphere groups and people with drums and all that sort of jazz. But I might just be an old bugger, so I don't know. but yeah, I don't know about the away fans. It could work, but then you've got a lot of work to do in the south stand because, like you said, it's been set up for the standing. So you've got all of that infrastructure already there, if that's where they're going to move them to. Do they move them to the north stand? But then you've got to put the problem of do people sit above them, or do they have the top tier and lower ball? So there's a lot of questions to ask where they put them, because the obvious place is the south stand, but they talked about setting an atmosphere group, and that's where all the atmosphere comes from at the minute.
Now, I'm not against an atmosphere group. I remember when it was around the time Steve Bruce was manager, it started in the southwest corner. There was a group called the Sunderland Football Group, and I even bought one of their scarves. They were selling scarves on the car. It was a bit more of a organic, but a group of lads who go to the games, go home and away. They were like the atmosphere. I'm talking about 15 years ago, maybe longer. And there was an acknowledgement then that the atmosphere was shite. And it was like, right, well, what can we do about it? So they created this group, and they would all meet on match days, and they all kind of sat together in the southwest corner, and they were selling these scarves so people could be a part of it. And they were the ones who were coming up with the songs about Darren Bent and Fraser Campbell and Asamoah Gyan and Kenwyn Jones, and they were posting them on the forums. This was probably before Twitter and the likes. That was such a big thing, but it was all happening online, and then it was organically coming at the games. And some of them songs people still sing now, and still some of the, when I think about recent times, the songs that people sing about players and stuff, they were created by that group. And some, I don't know what happened, it sort of dissolved all of that, but it was there for a couple of years, and it was good. And then they moved over to the south stand, and I think it kind of broke up a bit. But that's the only time in my lifetime there's ever been a quote unquote atmosphere group, and I actually thought it worked. So it depends how you do it. I think the acknowledgement of that they would have to engage with young fans is interesting, because they're the ones who are probably going to be I feel I'm only 33, but I feel like an old bugger. I go to the games now and I don't go to sing. There's people sing by me, and I just feel like, I can't be arsed. I can't, unless I'm pissed, and then I'm right up for it. You know what I mean? But if away from home's a different kettle of fish, because you've been on the drink all day. But and that's not me. I'm part of the problem, because I don't go to games and sing much. I do join in, but I'm not going to just, all right, it's quiet now, I'm going to start a song off. That's not in my makeup anymore. I'm a dad, 33-year-old. I'm not I'm not 18 anymore. Or 16 when I was first going away with my mates, and my dad would let us go on my own, younger than that even. So I think if they're going to do this, it does have to incorporate, and it does have to be fronted by younger fans. I think if they're going to go in that direction, it has to be young lads who've got loads of disposable income and they're just going home and away to watch Sunderland, and they're up for it. That's who it's got to be. It's not going to be old farts like us, unfortunately, who are running these things.
It wouldn't be me. If you're old for them, then bloody hell, I'm way past it. But
Martin's all in as we discovered this week. So.
Yeah. Well, I've always got that one to cling on to. But but you go back, the best atmosphere I've ever in anywhere, any stadium, anywhere in my entire life was Sheffield United in the playoffs, in that first season at the playoffs. But the thing is, it's all about almost like everything you put into the pot. And that season, there was a connection between the team. There was a first season at the stadium, and that night it was all foggy, and everyone was up for it because of the first leg, and we knew we needed a result. And you just felt there was, that atmosphere that night. And I've watched loads of sporting events other than Sunderland, and it's never been bettered anywhere where I've gone. And players who played in it still talk about it. But that was the same stadium, and so based on what the situation in front of you, that atmosphere can be created again. It's just you need that kind of, you need everything in the pot to kind of work for you and just produce it naturally. But you might convert us on the atmosphere group. You never know.
Well, we'll see. I think it's good that, again, David Bruce, at least, who's very high up in the club, is listen to what fans are saying. The atmosphere's crap. Well, how do we fix it?
Yeah. Exactly.
So they've we'll fix the PA system. We'll fix the sound system. We bring the lights in, the light shows, the build up to a match where the foghorn, all these things they have been better for atmosphere. There's little things, the flags out. I think the display group that we've got now is ran with fans and the club in conjunction, where before the previous iteration of that group was all fans. That's good, because it means that the club are actually working on par with the fans and trying to get this going. They're not being an obstacle. So they've done things like that, even now, like a bit like what you say at the Emirates when Arsenal score, the big flag waving. We've brought that in the last couple of months, I've noticed. The big flags at the side of the pitch. Those are things for young fans, really, but it just looks good.
Yeah.
And they've done a good job with that stuff, but it's the bits, it's the organic bits, like an atmosphere, like it being loud and being difficult place to play. The only time to be honest, there's been very few times where I've came away from games where I felt that. Before the derby and the cup last year was brilliant. It felt like a big occasion, a big game. That Chef Wed game in the playoffs in League One.
Yeah.
But those are big games. There's going to be big atmospheres for those games because everybody gets hyped up for it. You're fucking Swansea on a Saturday towards the end of the season. It's going to be very tough to get people in the ground going for it unless the football's good and unless we're going gung-ho. And this is taking us down another path, but I can't remember who said it this week, but they were talking about how they feel sorry for fans now because football's just crap, because there's basically two ways of playing. You either sit back and soak it up and counter-attack, or you want loads of the ball, and it doesn't lead to exciting football. It's not
Gary
like
Neville
when I was a kid.
on the overlap.
Was it Gary Neville, was it?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember who said it.
Well, someone else might.
And I agreed with that, totally. Because I'm like, the way football's played now, in particular in England, it doesn't lend to you're not on the edge of your seat during games, are you? Because it's just not the way it's played anymore, and it's maybe that's the problem, really.
But I do think there are ways you can generate it in the build-up as well to get people excited about what's going on. Because a lot of the times with Sunderland, you look at the stadium light and everyone rocks in either as the game's kicking off or 2 minutes before it's going to kick off, and like there's no real build-up before the game to the event that's about to happen. And I know you're going to take the piss because you're going to say it's a wrong-shaped ball, but when I've been to Twickenham before. And I know those are big events as well when you go and watch England. But the thing is, what they do, they've got a big fan zone around the ground, and I know that. If you can get people to go to the ground early, and if you've got good things like have a Guinness tent there and have loads of bait around, or even get loads of the local companies to set up stalls. Have a get a pie thing on the go, get someone else doing pasties, but all local people, get the local beer on. And to get a fan zone going with a screen and people can watch the game that's on before or something like that, or watch highlights of, put kind of retro stuff on, put like the old Sunderland games on or something like that on a big screen. But get people there early and get the atmosphere going there. Because if you have people having a few drinks in and around the ground, like the atmosphere is built up and then actually they're up for the game because they're all talking about the game. They're all talking about what's about to happen, but almost as a big group of Sunderland fans. And then they all kind of have to go into the ground together. But it's the same afterwards. Like around the ground, you talk about traffic and stuff. The fan zone can open after the game as well, where people can hang around the stadium, especially when the weather gets nicer at this time of year. People can come out the ground and have a couple of drinks and a pie while they're waiting for the traffic to go, or, well, we'll have a quick one here before going into town or whatever. But, it just gets people around the ground, gets the atmosphere built up, because when you get a big crowd together for one event, if you get them there together earlier, rather than all turning up at the end when they're all queuing and pissed off because the queues are there at the last 5 minutes and, they're going to miss the first couple of minutes of the match. Everyone kind of comes in drips and drabs. And, when the music starts to tell people that they're about to come out, like the ball's half empty. And then people come out and go, all right, come on, then let's go to those seats. It's almost like you want to get the atmosphere going. So if you've got most people around the ground, you start feeling about what you're about to see.
It's the same at the end of the game too, when the ground's half full.
Yeah.
People are just looking and going, right, well, if I leave a couple of minutes early, I can get back to the car before the traffic and stuff.
But if you've got something there for them to go to, for an hour, have got the fan zone for one, and it's a good atmosphere there. It's a good crack, and have a bit of cover when the weather's crap. I mean, and surely the club will make money out of that, and it'd solve the problem about people leaving early as well.
I suppose they've just opened Founders Bar, which is new. That new sports bar, where the old club shop used to be, and Sheepfolds is there. Sheepfolds, when it's warm, like tomorrow, it'll be good over Sheepfolds. A lot of them things you just said about, the local companies with the Scran on the go, the bars all over the place with a big screen. That's basically Sheepfolds. But the problem is the weather's shit for 90% of the year.
Yeah.
So on a good day like tomorrow, it'll be jumping in there. It'll be brilliant. But when it's pissing down next week, it's a bit different. There's a million things. We could talk about this for another hour, really.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at least there has been an acknowledgement of an issue. People are actually starting to say, the atmosphere has got worse. We're winning games. We're doing well on the pitch, and it's not translating to a buoyant atmosphere. And at least that's being acknowledged. And it's nice to hear the club say it out loud, because they could quite easily just ignore it to avoid being told by fans, you're having a go or whatever. At least there's an acknowledgement. But rather than pointing fingers and saying fans should be doing more, they're saying, right, well, let's work together. Let's create a consultation group. Let's talk about these things. If there's things the club can do, if there's things fans can do, let's work together and let's make the place. Ultimately, all everybody wants is the Stadium of Light to be a difficult place for away teams to come to. They want the whole experience of a match day to be good. They want, football aside, you want to turn, Martin was talking about this the other day, I think, when he was talking to Jeff Brown about when he was a kid, and he used to turn up to Roker Park like the first person in, and those days have gone to an extent, but they shouldn't. We have to step into the modern day and find ways of making the whole experience for families in particular, kids. We need to make that more attractive, so that when they come, they go away and they're like, I really want to do that again. Mm-hmm. And
the fan zone can have some players that were injured or, not in the squad or whatever.
Remember we had that fan zone back when we had it now. We were in League One when we had it. We had a fan zone for a few years there, but it was a bit now. Yeah, it was made out of...
You've got to do it properly.
Containers, and you've got to do it properly. You do. So, lots to think about on that anyways. We could, like I say, we could talk for another hour about this, but we'll get nowhere, mate. They're not going to listen to us.
No.
To be honest, there wasn't a great deal else to go into off the meeting minutes. There are working groups planned, walk-arounds with fans and stuff to see where they can improve things. Red and White Army suggested maybe making some of the areas on the concourse a bit more fan-friendly by proposing, artwork and things like that, just so they're not just blank grey areas, that they're actually things done by fans. So these are all good suggestions, and hopefully at least they're not going in the whinging about the owners and the whinging about the football. They're actually going because there's nothing really to whinge about on that front. They're just going and turn up with really positive suggestions about how we can all make the club better.
Yep.
Those meeting minutes...
Whinging about the paintwork.
Those meeting minutes are available on the club website if anyone wants to read them. I think they're also on redandwhitearmy.co.uk. So, if you haven't seen them, you can get them in a bit more detail than what me and Chris have just talked about, and give them a scan and see what you think. Otherwise, mate, I think we're going to leave it there. I'm looking forward to having a few pints tonight, and you can just sit at home and think about us having pints.
Yeah, cheers for that, mate. And I was going to say, because this is us doing a quick half hour, isn't it?
Quick half hour turned into an hour.
Exactly.
If you're still here, thanks. No, if you are catching this on Friday, there is a open invite for anybody to attend at the Fans Museum tonight. It's the kick-off event for the International Fans Weekend, because, of course, this weekend is International Fans Weekend, with, I think there's 150 or so supporters who've came in specifically from abroad just for this weekend, paying out the nose, I'm sure, to get here and probably see us lose. So last year they got treated to a 5-1 Blackburn defeat and a 0-0 draw against Bristol City. And there's more of them this year than last year. So there is an open invite for anybody to attend that event tonight. It's literally just a party. There's going to be macam delicacies on offer, peas pudding and ham sandwiches.
I can see you grinning. I can see you looking at me when you're saying all this.
Savoy dips and pink slices.
Aye.
Plenty of beer flowing. And we are setting up an impromptu recording studio, as we do at all of these events each year. So anybody in attendance can come and chat with us and record. We hope to speak to people from all over the world, get their stories on what it's like to be a Sunderland fan from wherever they are. We'll not get anyone in from Sheffield, I don't think. So,
are we done yet?
So yeah, if you're coming, come give it a shout and a chat, and we'll have a beer together, and you get to meet some Rota reporters. I think there's about 15 of us in attendance, so that should be cool. But importantly, we are recording, so there will be a pod out at some point over the next week or so, hopefully, which will be all of those stories knitted together. And you can go from the very start where we're all sober to the very end where nobody makes sense and we're all blabbering shite, and yeah, gets a bit hairy at that point where people start crying and stuff, and I love Sunderland and all that shite. So that should be fun. There's plenty more to come over the weekend. We will be joined on Sunday, I think, by Simon O'Rourke from ITV, who is a long-time follower of the club from afar, having covered for ITV Timetease for many, 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 many years. So he will be chatting to us about the Swansea game. There'll also be a reaction pod, probably at some point. I'm trying to think what time that'll go out, but we are doing that one from the pub. I'll be meeting Bomber and Brett in the pub, who are up for Fan Weekend. So that should be fun. So plenty to come over the coming days. We'll be back at some point next week as well. There'll be loads. There's a podcast basically every day at this point, isn't there, Chris? People are probably sick of hearing us, but they're not, actually. We're getting loads of good feedback. So
I'm sick of hearing you right now talk about this piss up. I hope you all have horrific hangovers and never drink again.
I drink Guinness, I don't get hangovers, mate. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks to Chris. Honestly, I didn't mean it. Sorry, mate. We'll see you on the next pod, which will be the reaction pod after the game. Catch us then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.